Okay, so hello everyone, and good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. And we are resuming today our studies of the Mahayana Uttara Tantra Shastra. And as you know, I've been away. I had a heart operation, and normally I wouldn't have started today. I'd have probably given myself another week or two of recovery. But today is a very special day in the Buddhist calendar, and it's not just a special day, but that special day, or this special day, is related to what we're studying. So it's too good an opportunity to miss, and doing my best. Let's see how we get on. So the way we start, as you know, is same as usual. We remind ourselves that we are Buddhists, that we are bodhisattvas, and that we're here to study, but we're here to study because we want to practice, and we really want to achieve all those wonderful things which are embodied in the Bodhisattva teachings. We have our lives, we have our jobs, we have our families, we have our bodies and our health and all the relative situation of this birth. But at the same time, because we have these teachings, we know that this birth is just one among many, and there's a bigger agenda, there's a bigger goal, there's a bigger opportunity that we've just been studying for many, many, many weeks as our Buddha nature, as our Buddha potential, our potential for awakening, improvement, enlightenment, all the good qualities. So let's do these prayers. It's very hot here, so I've got a fan going, and any bits of paper are liable to blow away any second. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds. From this moment on until we reach the very heart of enlightenment. Through our practice of generosity and all 6 transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality to be able to truly help sentient beings so lost in samsara. May each and every being be well. May they live long, be healthy, be well provided for, have good friends, find respect, and live in places of peace and plenty. Most of all, may they practice Dharma. May they each create the causes for these good circumstances to be their wealth in future lives. May they be free from suffering and from creating the causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural, sacred well-being totally beyond suffering and attain the great equanimity that is free of closeness or distance from anyone. Deyata shame shamavati shameta shatru Om kurim arajite karota keyorite jovati oloyane Pishuda nimale malapanaye kukure kaka grase grasana Om mukhi paramukhi amukhi shamme dhavane Sawa graha bandhanane nigrihitva Sawa bhava pravadina vimukta marapasha Savitva buddha mudra anudgatita Savamare putsarita Parishute biga shantu sava marakama. Glorious Guru, source of all blessing, ever present above our head on lotus and moonseed, through your immense kindness, ever sustain us, that the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind flow from you, and we are one. So, thank you. A couple of months ago, we concluded the fourth of the 7 chapters of this work. So let's remind ourselves of this work. We have the teachings of the Buddha, which very generally we call the sutras. And then we have the teachings of the great masters, which don't really bring in anything new that the Buddha didn't teach, but which make clear for us and which elaborate the teachings of the Buddha so we can understand them better. So these are called shastras. And we are studying a shastra from one of the 2 great founders of Mahayana Buddhism. One of them was Nagarjuna, and the author of this text was Asanga. But because of Asanga's own meditation accomplishment, we cannot separate him from future Buddha, Maitreya. After his several meditation retreats, his mind became one with future Buddha, Maitreya, and these teachings are seen as coming directly from Maitreya's inspiration. There were many texts, but there were 5 major ones. A couple of them were propagated from Asanga's time onwards. That's from about the 4th century of our era. This particular one was hidden for the right time. And so much later on, sometime in the 12th century, a great master called Maitreya was circumambulating a stupa, and it was an old stupa, there was a crack in it, and he saw light coming from the crack, and he had the stupa opened, and he found a hidden copy of this text. And because he was an emanation or a reincarnation of Asanga, then he understood its meaning, and he propagated it, and it went to Tibet through him. Maitreya was one of the gurus of Mapa Lotsa, Mapa the translator, and so this text is very special in our Kagyu lineage. Text itself is in 3 parts, as you know: the good beginning, which is the introduction and the title; the good end, which is the dedication; the main body of the text, which is the teaching. The teaching, the main body, is in 7 parts, which are divided into 2 sections, the first 3 and the last 4. The first 3 are described as the result to be achieved. The result to become Buddha, to be able to teach the Dharma and form the Sangha. That's the result. The last 4 chapters are presented as the cause for this result happening. When we look at causality in the relative world, we have a main cause which contains all the possibility of the result. It's like the seed of a plant. It's got the programming, the genetics to make its result. That's called the main cause, principal cause, primary cause. So the main cause of Buddha Dhamma Sangha is our Buddha nature, chapter 4. But beside the main cause, we have what are called ancillary, supplementary, complementary causes, or conditions usually they're called. So like if we go to nature and seeds and plants, each seed has the unique programming of its result. It's the only thing in the world that can make this flower, this tree, like an acorn makes an oak tree and so on. But all of those seeds need heat, light, fertilizer, rain, all sorts of things, which are general conditions. You can have as much heat, light, rain as you want, but if you don't have an acorn, you won't get an oak tree. They are general but necessary conditions. No rain, no light, you've got the acorn, but nothing happens. Keep this in mind, it's important today. So we finished chapter 4, Buddha Nature, which shows that every sentient being, not just humans, whatever sentient being means, and that's quite a big topic, has the potential to become Buddha. That's the way we see other beings. Well, that's all very well and good. But remember these general conditions. It wouldn't be any use to us if nobody had ever become Buddha. It would be a technical fact. If somebody said, if we had knowledge that there was gold in gold ore, that there's the potential for sesame oil in sesame seeds, but nobody had ever ground the seeds, it's just a fact. If nobody had ever got gold out of rock, interesting fact, but it's no use. But people who get the gold out of the rock, they get rich. They can do things, changes their lives. The people who get the oil out of the sesame seed, they can cook with it, can fry something. So the knowledge of the Buddha potential in sentient beings is very, very important. But what makes it so relevant, so meaningful, so inspiring, is the fact that people have worked on their Buddha nature and they've become better and better, step by step, like the Buddha over many, many, many hundreds of lifetimes, all the time getting better, purer, more peaceful, more qualities, more meditation accomplishment, until the process comes to the end, and it is absolute perfection. This is what we're looking at in this Enlightenment chapter. So because others have made this potential real, then that means for us that we can follow the path that they've shown that works for us to make our potential real. So the last 3 chapters show enlightenment. That's the word we've got. It's inadequate, but it's the word everyone uses. Other beings got enlightened. They made this potential a reality. And then that enlightenment gave them many qualities that were wonderful for themselves and totally helpful and meaningful for other beings. So we have a qualities chapter, and then their qualities gave them enlightened activity whereby they taught and helped and guided other beings so that the benefit becomes obvious. If we take the example of our Buddha Sakyamuni, he taught for 45 years. He taught hundreds of thousands of people, probably, and his teachings have remained since then until now, and they'll carry on, and they've helped billions of people. One person's qualities and power and purity and accomplishment have helped billions of people. You trace it back, all the kindness that's been taught, all the peacefulness, all the good things that we study, all came from one person's realizing their potential. the activity. So we study after Buddha nature, enlightenment, enlightened qualities, and enlightened activities. To refresh your memory, because it's a while since we saw each other, Buddha nature is an idea that gets rattled around a lot in Buddhist circles. People talk about it, read about it. Now, you're the wise ones. You know about it because we've seen it's very subtle. It's inconceivable. But we can know, well, what Buddha taught us. And we know, if you remember, 3 key points. Everyone has it the same. And that gives, depending on each person's karma, a potential. 3 major statements. Then we explored it through 10 points. We studied it as a fruition, as a cause, its influence, and so on. 10 detailed examinations. And then we had 9 examples, like the Buddha in the lotus, the honey in the bees, to help us understand how something can be so full of qualities, yet totally hidden, relatively. And that if you do what needs to be done, you can bring it out. The beekeeper can get the honey. The person with the statue in a mold can knock off the clay and polish it, so you've got a beautiful statue, and so on. So now you are wised up about Buddha nature, and you'll see that when you hear people talking about it roughly and often wrongly, and jumping to wrong, conclusions, and they just say, oh, well, you're Buddha, I'm Buddha, and they don't understand. But we understand now through having studied. It's a very, very good thing. So today we're going on to the chapter on what is called enlightenment. And this in Sanskrit is the word Bud, or the Sanskrit root, Bud, that gives us Buddha, and so on. So we'll look into that in a minute and the real meaning. But the reason we're starting our studies today is because it's a special day in the Buddhist calendar, Tibetan Buddhist calendar. Tibetan Buddhists have 5 special times of the year, 5, what do you call it? Religious holidays or celebration days. One of them is not a day, it's a fortnight. At the beginning of, it starts with Tibetan New Year, when we celebrate the miracles that the Buddha performed. And then usually in May, sometimes in June, on the full moon, we celebrate Buddha's enlightenment and his passing into nirvana together, same day. There's another day we celebrate the Buddha's first teaching of the Dharma. There's today when we celebrate the Buddha transferring as a 10th level bodhisattva from Tushita paradise to this world because the time was ready to teach the Dharma. That's today. And that's the beginning of the Buddha showing his enlightenment. That's why it's relevant to this chapter we're starting. And then sometime in November, usually, we have the Buddha's return from the Deva realm, where he was teaching and liberating his mother in the daytime, and at night time he was returning to earth and teaching Abhidharma, mainly to Ananda. I think it was Ananda, can't remember, one of his main disciples. Anyway, they're the 5 Buddhist festivals. Today's one is called Lumsujukpa in Tibetan, which means entering the mother's womb. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I want to get on with our text, but I need to tell you how can you say, some things. When we look back at what is recorded in the sutras, what Buddha himself taught, then there is very little about his life. He doesn't tell us very much. He tells us about things, about Dharma and so on, but there's not a lot directly from him. Most of the story of the Buddha, which when you get into the details, has a lot of details in the life of Buddha, most of it comes from what are called, not the sutras, but the agamas. The agamas are the collected, I don't know what you call them really, legends, stories about the Buddha from soon after his passing. But you know, stories are stories. Stories evolve very quickly. I've seen in my life, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad, when there's a story about somebody, because people gossip and people talk to each other, stories can get enhanced in a matter of days. So here we're looking at a matter of about 100 years. And so what were considered probably true or possibly true stories, or perhaps nice stories, I don't know what happened at the time, they were gathered together in the agamas, which are not, how can you say, the prime part of our Buddhist scriptures, but they're there. So there are all sorts of details about the Buddha's mother, Buddha's parents, and now there's so much archaeological, historical research, so much that can be done. And we're seeing more and more, what's probably true, probably not true. So all of that's complicated. It's hellishly complicated. And what you need to know, because you're in the Tibetan tradition, is that all of this story of the Buddha evolved. Then the Mahayana ideas and thinking evolved, and all those stories were seen through Mahayana eyes. Some 500, 600, 700, 800 years after the Buddha, and we get the Mahayana scriptures, and they'd been around for quite a few hundred years before the Dharma came to Tibet. Tibetans are incredibly pious. They can have incredible devotion, and for them they had incredible devotion to all the Buddhist scriptures. They didn't investigate thinking, was this a later invention? Was this an earlier invention? They were like, all of them sacred. And this has led to some very interesting stuff, so we won't go there because it's so interesting it would take hours and hours to talk about. But for instance, our 17th Karmapa is quite clued up on this. And so he's worked with modern scholars trying to find out what are the more authentic, less authentic, what were written at a much later date with an agenda by people. That when Buddhism went to China, they have respect for the ancestors. So amazingly, a new scripture, new sutra is discovered about respect for the ancestors. Isn't that amazing? So, and it said, and the Buddha said, and you should do this and respect your ancestors. It's all phrased as though the Buddha said it, 500, 600 BC, but almost definitely written, 600, 700, 800 years later. So present Karmapa is very interested in that. The generation of Tibetan lamas I studied with, they just took all the Chinese and Indian sutras as or what we call gospel. So anyway, the story that the Tibetans have mainly comes from a text called the Lalita Vistara. And the Lalita Vistara is a Mahayana text that takes the legends of the Agamas and phrases them in Mahayana terms. So there we have the parents of the Buddha, a king and a queen. They probably were not quite kings and queens, but anyway, that's what we have, and so on. So the story goes like this, and there's one bit here that's very important for us so that we understand well. The Buddha had gone through hundreds of lives, working out of karma, and then into the first bodhisattva level, second, third, all the way up to 10th bodhisattva level, many lifetimes in the 10th bodhisattva level, final lifetime in the 10th bodhisattva level, with many, many emanations, but mainly based in a deva body in the Tushita paradise, where he was teaching a text called the 100 Gateways of Dharma. And while he was there, he saw 5 things about our world in the Mahayana version, not just our world, but our world is part of roughly 1 billion planets which are karmically related to each other. That's a long story, but and so the Buddha saw something happening in all those places, but our interest is planet Earth. So what he saw was, one, that the lifespan of humans was right for teaching the Dharma. It wasn't so long, as it is said to be in some planets, that like in the Deva realms, life is so long, people aren't spurred on to practice by impermanence and their mortality. They've got time. They've got lots and lots of time. So too long a lifetime is not helpful for teaching Dharma. Too short a lifetime, so in the predictions for our world, and however long it takes, the lifespan will diminish. It goes down to about 10 years. That's too short, you don't have enough time to practice. So, sort of lifespan at the time the Buddha manifested on this earth was short enough so that we were aware of our mortality, but long enough to give us time to practice enough to move on before we get reborn again. So he saw the lifespan was good. He saw parents, karmically destined to be his parents, whose position in society was the best one for him to be respected and to live the life he was going to lead. So the parents were right. So it's not so much the parents as their social status, which in the Tibetan version is as a king and queen. He saw the future mother was right. She was somebody who in past lives had made a profound wish to become his mother when he became Buddha in the future. So the mother, her name was Mahamaya, she was there, ready to go on earth and ready to conceive him. The entourage was right, which means that there were hundreds, thousands of people coming in to be reborn on earth who would be his disciples, already born, about to be born. He could see that over all these hundreds of lifetimes, the connections, profound connections he'd made, like our great lamas make with people, they were coming to fruition and drawing his disciples for that life to the earth. So the entourage was right. And he saw that the place was right. India was a civilized, cultured place on the trade routes from which, with time, first of all, in India, his teachings could flourish, but then from there, they could spread to other countries. So he had this fivefold vision, and he knew it was time to emanate to earth. Not really to take rebirth on earth, like we take rebirth, where you leave one life and then you're plunged completely into another life, to emanate to earth, which means we see all of his life as basically still rooted in 10th level bodhisattva, in a way rooted still in tushita, where everything that happens is a demonstration, theatre, a play in order to perfectly introduce Buddha Dhamma, the truth, to our world. So the time was right. So it said, because he hadn't finished that particular set of teachings, he left, or he charged Buddha Maitreya, future Buddha Maitreya, to carry on the teachings, to be his regent in Tushita. And then he, emanated into his mother's womb. So there's a whole story then. You read it in different books about the dreams she had and her pregnancy and wonderful things that happened, how she was on the way back to her own kingdom, because she was a princess from a kingdom, when she stops and she gives birth, and how she dies 7 days afterwards. And then her sister, Mahaprajapati, becomes the Buddha's wet nurse, we'd say these days, and becomes effectively his mother, stepmother, throughout the rest of his life, and one of his first nuns as well, when women become ordained. So that story is in many books. I don't need to go into the details. It's the Mahayana version from the Lalita Vistara. The Lalita Vistara takes information from the Agamas. So you'll find one text in the Theravada Sutras, for instance, in the Pali Canon, which is called the Sutra of the Wondrous and something else, I forget what, but it's based on the details in there, but presented from a Mahayana point of view. So far, so good? Okay, so just a second. Got to fiddle around with things on my screen. Just give me a moment. Okay. Yeah, good. So sometimes in the Buddha's teachings, you can't see the wood for the trees. And what the teachers present us, like Gampopa, great teachers, for them some things are so obvious they don't even need to mention it. So what they mention is details that people might not know. But as the centuries have gone by, the obvious point is what needs pointing out. So for instance, if we read Gampopa's teaching about sufferings of birth, he goes into life in the womb. This is the suffering, childbirth itself. Get lots of details. You don't get the main point, which is you've been snatched out of the everything and put into a birth. And there you are for the rest of that life. You're in that country with those parents, with that karma. You're born again. It's enormous. It's not just to do with the details of what it's like, the sufferings in the womb. It's the whole thing of having to go through another human life. So here, when we look at this Lumsu Jukpa, what we're celebrating today. We're looking at the Buddha manifesting into our world. But the main point is that he comes and starts off the life that will set the wheel of Dharma in motion for thousands of years. Nobody needs to add anything. He will set it perfectly in motion because everything's right. And that will show us that our Buddha nature can be made into Buddha. He will teach us that. He will give all the different methods suited to different people at different stages. When he saw that his disciples were, gathering, some of them were already bodhisattvas, great yogis, people of great spiritual accomplishment, like his very early disciples, the Kashyapa brothers, 3 brothers. They were already great yogis. They had thousands of disciples. When they joined him, it was a problem because they brought their disciples with them. The Buddha, who was teaching in, what's now Sarnath, to a few dozens, few hundred of people, when they came and joined him, all of a sudden he had several thousand. 3 brothers, all of them yogis, all of them with followers. So he had, and his disciples were going begging every day in little villages. It's not easy for little villages if you've got thousands of people turning up begging for food. So he had to move. He had to move to the city. And fortunately, Mahakashyapa, one of his early disciples, his disciple, Mahakashyapa's yogic disciple, was the king. And so anyway, that's the whole story when we go into the Buddha's life. But everything was ready for the Buddha to come, to teach Dharma perfectly, to set it in motion for thousands of years, for billions of people, and to show that what total enlightenment is. So this is what we'll be studying in this chapter. And we'll be studying it in detail. And for instance, when we'll study it through seven different main areas. Number 5, which is called manifestation, is about the different Buddha kayas, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nimanakaya. Nimanakaya is about the life of our historical Buddha. And we see that in Buddha's life, there are 12 main deeds. I've only got 10 fingers. I usually hold up my fingers for the numbers, so 10, 12. 12 main deeds of the Buddha. Which make his teachings strong, make his teachings last, make his teachings make sense. So the birth, the transfer from Tushita to his mother's womb, and then being born apparently in a human body, is the first deed of the 12. But if we look at some of the others, and we will do when we get to that part of the chapter, then we see as he grows up, the first 29 years of his life, he has as much as anybody in his time could ever hope or wish for. He's strong. He's so handsome. Now, if it was today, he'd be in all the magazines, Paparazzis would be after him. He was a great sportsman. From a very young age, he was brighter than his best teachers for languages, for astronomy, for mathematics, and so on. handsome, intelligent, great sportsman. If you look at modern magazines about people, they're either sportsmen, royalty, brilliant minds, good looking. He had all of that. He married several of the most beautiful women of his time. He had a harem as well, lots of beautiful women, entertainment, all the things people want. As far as wants go, he had the lot. So when he left it and said, that's not it, people could believe it. Imagine he was a loser, okay? He's not handsome, he's not strong, he's not bright, he's never made it with the ladies, and he says worldly success doesn't work. What are people going to say? The guy's a loser, of course. But if somebody who had the lot leaves it and said, no, there's more than this. If he's famous, like as a prince, he was famous in other kingdoms. So bright, so handsome, so, he's got the lot. If he leaves it and says there's more, people can really be stunned, shocked, and think there must be more. Then another deed, for 6 years he practices asceticism. It's India. There are lots of ascetics. They go without food, they do the most extreme things in the name of religion. They get some achievements out of it. Then he's more ascetic than anybody, and he goes, nah, not that either. People can believe it because they know he's done more than anybody. So these 12 deeds make his teachings have impact, and they make them last. But the whole thing is a show in the Mahayana. He doesn't achieve enlightenment back there under the Bodhi tree. That's not the Mahayana version. He works through the 10 bodhisattva levels. He reaches total enlightenment at the end of the 10th bodhisattva level in a plane of very, very pure existence, which is called, wonderful title, highest. So it's got a fancy Sanskrit name, which is unpronounceable. I have no idea. It looks like Akantha. There's some vowels missing, Akanistha, however it was pronounced, because we don't know. It's a language that died and was revived. But anyway, the highest level of total purity is where he becomes Buddha. What happens on our planet is theatre. It's called emanation, manifestation, to make the Dharma work in our world. And it's a very, very important point we need to get our head round. So if we come back now to what we're celebrating today, or we move on from entering the mother's womb, which is the moment of conception, to Buddha's birth. It says when he was born, those present heard him declare he was the greatest being in the world. They heard him say that, and they saw him take 7 steps, and underneath each step, a lotus flower appears, and so on. 7 steps in each of the major directions. Now that don't make sense. Anybody who's a doctor and medical will tell you about vocal cords and their development, and that somebody couldn't have a voice of thunder, who's just been born. They're just maternity, pop, they've come out, and then they've got this voice of thunder which declares them being the greatest being in the world. It's not possible. And walking immediately, we've all seen babies learning to crawl, to walk, and so on, from being in the womb, straight out and walking. No, this is legend. So what do we have to understand? The difference between what somebody does and what other people experience. Put it simply, did the Buddha, as a newborn baby, have that voice? Or are we looking at rather everyone present heard that sound? It's not the same thing. Is it that the Buddha walked? Or that everyone present saw him? Whatever you want to say, hallucinated, experienced, saw him walk. And I want to go back to a story I've shared with you many, many times, but it's one of the most striking things in my life. So it really happened in my life. Not stories, agamas, 2,500 years ago, make up your own mind. Something I and other people experienced with the 16th Karmapa. In a very nice old chateau in the Dordogne, Chateau de Chabon, where we were staying. He had an interview group of about 14, 15 people, and they went in, I ushered them in, and they came out, and they'd heard him speaking in different languages. Each person heard him in their own language. An Italian woman, she was the first one who came to me. She was like glowing, 1,000,000,000 watts. She was, I had no idea he spoke Italian. And I'm thinking, I've got no idea he spoke Italian either, He had a few words of English, Tibetan, but she'd been in there for 15, 20 minutes, whatever it was, getting a teaching in Italian, totally relevant to what was on her mind. Another guy heard him speaking in English fluently. A Christian person saw him as Jesus. Other people could see him as Buddhist deities. This happened for me, it happened for many people. You see him as Chenrezig, as Mahakala, and so on. So are we talking about somebody who can speak several languages all at the same time? Who's got a tongue that can do Italian, English, Tibetan, which is not really, how do you do that? Or are we talking about a presence so pure that each person gets exactly what they need? And because of the way our brains and everything is wired, you hear it in your own language, you see it through what makes sense to your own eyes. Does that make sense? That the Karmapa, simply by being there in sublime, profound meditation, and perhaps talking in Tibetan, who knows? But that each person sees and hears. They say seeing is believing. So here we go into questions that philosophers have asked all over the world, and that scientists ask these days, modern physicists ask. Is what we perceive what is there? What is perception? Our human perception. So what we are looking at in this Enlightenment chapter is the life of Buddha, and more generally, what enlightenment means. We'll look at it in those 7 areas of detail. So I think that's enough about today being the special day and how it's very relevant to the Enlightenment chapter. But now this word enlightenment itself, we're stuck with it. It's been around for so long. Everyone uses it in all the books. There's no way we're going to get rid of it or change it. I don't think it's a word that gives the right impression. I mean, when you hear the word enlightenment, what happens in your head? Somebody got enlightened, or like especially in other traditions, you read Zen stories. Something happens, master says something, a master does something a bit dramatic, and blah, 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 disciple so-and-so was enlightened, it said. I think it gives the impression of something that kind of can click right into place. Sudden breakthrough, where everything's clear. For me, but maybe not for you. And that's why I'm asking you, what happens in your head when you hear the title of this chapter. So it comes from a Sanskrit root, which is bud. Bud, B-U-D. And that root has two main meanings that we need to stretch out over time. In studying this text, we are studying Mahayana teachings, not Vajrayana. We're looking at enlightenment as a very long-term journey over many lifetimes, many hundreds of lifetimes. A lovely journey, better and better each time. Because of the work we can do in each life, it makes the next life less troubled, more opportunity, more positive circumstances, better mind inside you, better circumstances outside. We can make progress. So the word Bud has two meanings. And when the early translators had to translate texts into Tibetan, they couldn't find one Tibetan word that conjured up to the mind both meanings of Bud. So the Tibetan word for Bud has two syllables. That's the best they could do. It's Sanje. 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 Sang, the first syllable, evokes one basic meaning, which means totally pure. Totally pure. So what do we mean? We have to stretch this over time. Well, pure means not impure, right? What's impure? We've got three areas of impure. One is more emotional, let's say. So you get your famous 5 there: anger, desire, ignorance, pride, jealousy. Right? They're called kleshas in Sanskrit. Means poisons, cankers, impurities, any nasty word like that you can think of. Kind of words, something that really poisons you, pollutes you. They're called pollutants. They're the heaviest ones. So over time, the anger becomes no longer manifest. We don't get angry at others and hurt them with our bodies, with our speech anymore. Then the cause of that, the anger that's inside us, which is still polluting, still dirtying, still there, gets less and less because we're working on it. We're transforming it into loving kindness. We're exploring the roots of the anger, the psychological roots, the karmic roots. We're working on them. The anger gets less and less until in the bodhisattva levels it becomes what are called the first moments that come out of nowhere as reactions to people, to situations. And so gradually anger in the end is uprooted. It's a long job. Because you don't know what's coming in the future. And you might feel you've gone beyond anger now, with what's happening to you now, in your present life circumstances. You have no idea who's going to turn up tomorrow, or who's going to turn up in the next life, or what situations are going to frustrate you. No idea. So we don't just work on what's called anger, we work on what Tibetans call bhaksha, which is the hidden potential to become angry that you don't even know you're carrying. And you'll only know when something happens and all of a sudden it upsets you. When you thought you'd gone beyond upset, you thought you were in control of yourself. And now there's somebody or something, or it might be even inside you, your own mind, your own body, sickness. You can't tell till it happens. So we need the clarity that you get in the bodhisattva levels, where you start to know your own karma from past lives that hasn't happened yet. That sort of thing. So you can see working on just anger. It's a journey of lifetimes and lifetimes, and as we go through the bodhisattva levels, we see it disappear. And the same with desire, this feeling of dissatisfaction that you need this or that's, you'd be happier if you had that, and so on. All the mind poisons, gradually purified, song, to attain purity where they're not there anymore. In my wonderful life, and through the incredible masters I've met a couple where sitting with them and their minds are like space. There's no anger there. They couldn't get angry if they wanted to, because it's not there. It's just not there. And the same with desire. They really don't need anything. They're not just saying, I don't need anything. They really don't need anything. They're 100% okay. Sometimes yogis, they're so okay, they get neglected by their Rinpoche yogis. There's one very famous one. I met his reincarnation as an old man. But the previous one, he was so okay with anything. His servants, his attendants got lazy, and they'd realized, oh, we've left him out on the veranda and the night's gone cold. And they've come rushing out to bring him in and saying, Rinpoche, are you cold? No, it's fantastic. He's not cold, he's not hot, doesn't get hungry, doesn't need anything. I mean, this really happens. Not just in the story of Buddha. This happens with people these days. You can find, it might not be the 100%, but it's so much on the way. So song means pure, free from the mind poisons, one. But also song means pure, free from dualistic thinking that leads to the mind poisons, the story of me and the projections of other onto other people. First of all, we need to even understand that that is there, that we do project onto each other, and that maybe who we think of as our brother, sister, mother, enemy, maybe in themselves they're not quite how we experience them, and so on. So that gets worked on life after life after life, until the duality itself goes. There is no longer self and other. As bodhisattvas, we become everybody. Very hard for us to imagine, because we're so dualistic. So song, totally purified through lifetimes, hundreds of lifetimes of beautiful work, of all dualistic dichotomy that leads to the problems. And then also song in a third area, which is meditative power, When you become really, really good at meditation, like Milarepa, you can do any meditation straight away. Ho, ho, ho. I don't know if you've tried to learn any meditation, but the time it takes to even get into it, to even get a little bit of something happening because of it, some results, we have obstacles, meditation blockages through our long, long history in samsara. And we get rid of these. So the first word in Sanskrit, first meaning of Buddha, is like totally pure, free from those three obscurations. So pure. That's when you hear Buddha, you hear Buddha as a person, make it a person. It means that person's so totally pure. The other meaning of Buddha is complete. So here, this isn't about what's not there, the impurities. It's about what is there, and that we've seen quite a bit in this Buddha nature text. The wisdom, the compassion, the power to help beings. And even in our human life, we can see this awakening developing in ourselves, in each other. There's more kindness, there's more love, more simplicity. We're more at peace with ourselves. But then we can see in those who are our elders on the path, in the Sangha, that they have tremendous love and tremendous skill in helping others, and great wisdom in their words and their understanding of what's going on inside us. Is why we go to these masters for advice. So every wonderful human quality, and in particular the 6 paramitas, then through human lives and then through the 10 bodhisattva levels, these become absolutely as best as they can. The word Buddha gives an impression in the mind like the most beautiful flower, that's been emerging and then opening up, and then when it reaches its most perfect and everything's there, the beauty, the smell, it's just perfect. If you were Sanskrit and you hear this word Buddha, so when they have Buddha, who's somebody who embodies that, all of the qualities that a being can possibly have, the wonderful, helpful qualities, everything is 100%, couldn't be more. So with the purity and the qualities, so the purity in Tibetan is song, and the fullness of all the qualities, the completeness is je, sanje. We translate in English as enlightenment, enlightened being, or we use the Sanskrit Buddha. But the main point for us in this chapter is that we're looking at somebody who goes to the very end of their bodhisattva journey to show us that this potential we have can ripen completely into Buddhahood. So when we make our prayers at the beginning, when we pray, may I become Buddha to help all beings, pray for enlightenment, it's a long-term wish. Gampopa himself says, if you think one day you're going to wake up suddenly enlightened, forget it. It ain't gonna happen. It's work. And he presents all of his main textbook as the reason I'm writing this book is to give you an idea of the work you've got to do. But he said, if you think one day you're just gonna, enlightened, that's generally true. That's generally true. My teacher was Akon Rinpoche. He would often stop in the middle of his talk and hear what he was saying and suddenly put it into question. He'd stop and say, on another hand, so many times, he seems stop in his own tracks. So that's generally true. But of course there are exceptions, and we see this in the lives of great teachers like of our age. There's a great Hindu teacher called Ramana Maharshi, very great being. And he just one day lay down on the floor and had a revelation, changed all of his life, became a great master after that, teaching sublime things. But this is the power of past lives. It means that all that work that Gampopa says, you won't get it without the work. So much had been done in past lives. And then you die, you get reborn, but because of the momentum, the power of all of our past life work, it overrides everything else and wakes you up to take you back as far as you got before. I think it's happened in one way or another to most of us. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. We could have had, ordinary lives, but we didn't. I was going to have an ordinary life as an engineer. I was doing very well. My bosses were all old and they were incompetent. They were all going to die or retire. And I had a career path that was amazing, They offered me the next job up, a key to the executive toilet, that's not nothing. And then just when I got this amazing job offer young, something inside me revolted. I became revolting and said no. And that got me here. I think in one way or another, this happens to all of us. So anyway, in this chapter, we're looking at enlightenment. And let's just do the first verse, and then we'll stop for today, because we've done a lot. So we're on page 187 of our book, and verses 168 and 169. The structure is quite interesting. It's a bit complicated. We're going to see our 7 main topics, which are in the second verse, 169, being presented as through their main points. So verse 168 gives us the main points: enlightenment, purity, achievement, freedom, benefit for oneself and for others, enlightenment as a basis, as a basis, and then enlightenment as the 3 kayas: depth, Dharmakaya; vastness, Sambhogakaya; greatness of nature, Nirmanakaya; their enduring nature, that's the kayas, 3 kayas, and suchness, or the sort of isness, pithiness, the enlightenment itself. We call it suchness, in itself, not its quality and this, that, but in itself. What is it? These are the 7 key points or presentations. And then the actual titles of our 7 topics are the nature of enlightenment, that will be purity; its cause is our achievement on the path; as a fruition, it is ultimate freedom; As a function, it functions bringing great benefit to oneself and to others. As a basis, we look at its qualities, basically, its endowments, its manifestation as the three kayas, depth, vastness, greatness of nature, how those three kayas are permanent in different ways, each one of them, and then suchness, which is what enlightenment's all about, how it's basically inconceivable. So we stop there for today. We're back on track, we're back in the book, and anything that was good and meaningful, then let's dedicate that goodness to all our fellow beings. May whatever virtue was created by this session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained, enlightenment, by the main enemy, our mind's defilements, being completely defeated. Through that, may each and every sentient being become freed from the ocean of existence, troubled by its waves of rebirth, aging, sickness, and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom it's not arisen. In those in whom it has arisen, may its development know no setbacks, and may it increase ever more and more. Through our virtue, may we quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. Thank you all very, very much. Now it's your turn. If you've got any comments or any questions I'm able to respond to.
Yeah, I wanted to.
Hiya.
It's me now or
Yeah,
someone else?
yeah. I think
Okay.
it's you.
I just wanted to say that those wonderful stories you shared with us about the 16th Karmapa, I had the big fortune to experience with the 17th Karmapa. How he understands every language. Few times I was with the Israelis there, like either for your audience or teaching or something, and he would react to us talking in Hebrew, and he would even answer questions that we whisper to each other in Hebrew. He would answer those questions. So that was one thing, and also he could manifest as something else in front of our eyes, and also when he used to give teachings, you can't write down everything. So you have like this is missing, this bit is missing. So one time we decided, like 12 of us, to sit after the teaching and compare notes. So whatever is missing for someone else can fill in. And we couldn't do that because everybody read something else. And we asked each other, are you sure you were in this teaching? Sometimes completely different. So, so that's how it was.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And it's just amazing that, I mean, this is in our lifetimes. It's not just in the books and in the past, and you have to believe it And the more we practice, the more we're open, then the more these kind of things tend to happen.
Yes, and this kind of cements your devotion because there's no argument. I watched it, I saw it, I heard it.
Mm.
So that's the wonderful thing of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ken, I've got a question about mind poisons.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're doing initial prayers, we wish everyone to be well.
Mm.
And I sometimes try to include people who've done me great harm.
Mm.
And I'm finding it impossible to generate. I don't wish them well, actually. I'm so angry.
Mm.
And I wondered whether you could speak anything of your experience or what you've learned about how to overcome that as a real barrier. How can you begin even to generate kindness towards people who have destroyed your life, for example? Like I don't know how to do that in spite of working with people close to me, etc., and expanding it further.
Mm. Yeah, you can't. I mean, you can't always. And I think one needs to be very realistic and not sort of feel bad if you can't achieve that, wishing well on those who've been very harmful. Usually the advice that's given is you start small with people who've harmed you a little bit. And so when you can manage to do that, then either with real situations, or if there aren't that many real situations that we've got to draw on from our personal existence, imaginary situations. But from the outset, you know what you want to achieve. You know that it's both a liberation for you, it's a healthy state of mind. If you can get to a point where you can feel that kind and peaceful way and so on towards them, even though just now it's not possible because of the power of trauma. Trauma is so strong, there's just no way that we can psych ourselves into overcoming it, in days, weeks, or even in years. So we work with what we can do. We know where we want to go. And if something's just too hard to do, then we leave it as an aspiration for the future. But people who've done that, leave it as an aspiration for the future, sometimes find that 10 years on, 15 years on, where they've been doing something else, different practice, different meditation, they come back and it's doable. They can work on it.
Thank you. That's very useful. Start with someone who's caused you a little bit of harm. That's useful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And aspiration. Yeah. Thank you.
And Tonglen, as a practice, is very useful because we're not just working on our own case, we're imagining people who've been hurt by other people and we're wishing them well. And because it's not so close to home, we can visualize a process. We're doing it in a very living way with our breath, not just as a thinking exercise, but we're actually sort of breathing what they need to do into them and taking out their blockages with the in-breath. It's, as time goes by, it's very helpful, I found. Yeah.
Hi, Ken. Good morning. May I ask a question?
Sure, Simon, yeah.
It's lovely to see you back as well. So, whilst doing the best we can, we kind of do all the good stuff that we can, but we also, there are times where we'll harm others. And how do we deal with that? I suspect it may be linked to what you were talking about with the Tonglen and all that side, but what's your view in terms of how we how we just balance our human life where we get things wrong along the way.
Yeah, I think that varies from person to person in terms of the practice they're doing, the intensity of the practice they're doing, and the relationship they have with their own Dharma teachers. Because I'm thinking those who've, for instance, doing the four special foundations, right? And they've got to doing Vajrasattva practice, then this kind of area is talked about, discussed a lot. The personal aspect in one's own life, one talks about it with the teacher, and we just realize what a need there is for, what can you say, dealing with it, purification every day. And then it's the same thing. We develop a habit of seeing how we screw up every day, basically, and sometimes more, sometimes less. And the need to be honest with ourselves about our own responsibility as a human being, and that it is our fault rather than others. Whatever is our fault, and even if others are provocateur and nasty bits of work, and in worldly terms it's their fault, in terms of our own standards of how ideally we want to be, when we realize how far we've got to go. So all the time, every day, we're doing Vajrasattva practice to deal with the little things. But then unfortunately, if in our life we make a big boo-boo and we really do hurt somebody, then we've got a mechanism in place and a habit in place, and we can do big purification. And sometimes even spend days, weeks in retreat if there's something that we really feel was a big shortcoming in our life. But that's if somebody's at that stage doing the special foundations with a teacher they can dialogue with and so on. If it's somebody who's much newer to the path and they've got a much more distant relationship with the teacher, I think then the advice is going to be different. If it's a good teacher, it will help them move that little bit forward as much as they can. But it might not be within this bodhisattva perspective. It might be just within the range of, like Akram Rinpoche used to say, when somebody really upsets you, go back to your room and beat up your pillow. Really take it out on the pillow, but don't take it out on the person. And hit that pillow until it's out of it. I mean, you don't just do it once. You really let go. You haven't got rid of the anger inside yourself. You haven't got rid of the propensity for that to happen again. But at least you've not hurt another person, which is a huge step forward. Or you've hurt them a little bit less. Or, you learn to count to 10. Hold it in. Sometimes that's makes a huge difference.
Thank you so much. That's lovely. Thanks, Ken.
And some of the Rinpoches I know, they do so much Vajrasattva because they're so aware. And Akon Rinpoche used to describe himself as chocolate-coated shit. He said, people see the outside, they see the chocolate. I see the inside. I see what goes on in my mind. And he's being very honest. He'd been very honest. Sometimes he'd be going into the shrine room to give a teaching. I'd be helping him on, with his cloak or his Zen. And he'd say, go tell some more lies. And I'd look at him shocked, thinking, Rinpoche, you tell the Dharma. And good disciple thinking all the right things. And he'd say, I don't know nothing compared to Buddha, but I'm going to go in there and people are going to believe it. He was really very honest about himself and his limitations, but he was the only Rinpoche on the block, that's all we had. So we had to do it. And he did a lot of prayers and Vajrasattva.
Ken. Yeah, Ken.
Yeah. Hi, Charlie.
Hi. I was thinking I was getting upset like probably lots of people in the world, about the Gaza situation things, and then thinking, well, what can I do? What can one do about that? And what I've done is just including in Netanyahu in my prayers that he becomes well, sensible, compassionate, and that's my way of kind of addressing that situation.
Yeah, I mean, there's that situation, but all the time. And we're presented with good and evil, basically. People who are depicted as, whether it's true or not, like America, Trump, whatever it is, we've got that. And in worldly terms, people are doing horrible things and evil and so on. But we've got our own minds to look after, and we know where we're going with our mind. And that becomes a huge challenge, sorting all this out. I've not sorted it out because, what's going on in terms of karma, wherever it is. I mean, not just the situations we're getting through the media every day and that are highlighted. All the time there are victims and victimizers. So we feel bad about the victims. We find it very hard to feel compassion for them. We feel compassion for the victims. But if you believe in karma, then what's the backstory? What's the story behind this that caused somebody to be born in that life where they're the victim of that person? What's the karma that makes this person a victimizer, and so on? To understand karma, I've got a long way to go. It won't be until I'm bodhisattva, goodness knows what level, that I'll understand. But I know karma exists, and that what's happening right now is only the surface of much longer term stories. And what people are doing now to each other is writing the future. It's enormous. But I do know that my only job is to feel loving kindness and compassion for them all, and not to try and practice compassionate activity in this world through anger because the situation is upsetting, but to practice compassionate activity through wisdom. The fact that you don't get upset by horrors doesn't mean you don't do something about them. People think, if I don't get angry, if I don't get upset by this, I'm never going to react. That's stupid. If there's something that one can do to help, whatever it is, victims, poverty, anything, we should do it. It's our duty as bodhisattvas. We're praying for people to be happy and the causes of happiness. And if you can give something of yourself, of your money, of your time, or whatever to do something, that's what we're committed to. But you don't need to get angry to do that. You just need to have your eyes open and have a kind heart. Want to help. Anger clouds our mind.
Ken, hi, it's Maris from Japan.
Hi, Maurice from Japan.
Hi.
Hello.
So today or this week was, it's been 80 years since the bomb was dropped in Hiroshima, and today it was Nagasaki. And the Japanese, they have I feel there's a good insight here in terms of having an atrocity done, and the idea of karma being a Buddhist country. And every year, Japanese people gather and they celebrate peace and praying for the peace for all, for of course the atomic bombs don't drop again, but also for the people suffering and the people who suffer, of course, of the ancestors who suffered in the past, but for the future. So it's more of this kind of equanimity, and there's not a hostility against Americans, or you know what I mean. So it's kind of it's an after story, but it's very much related to what's happening now, the attitude of peace. And I don't know, I find it quite inspiring, people of all different nations getting together, and yeah. Yeah, that saying, give peace a chance. And I mean, it's in our heart too. So when we see these things through the media, or even in our own households, or in our own neighborhoods, yeah, I think those four immeasurables are just really really important.
Yeah, and they're progressive as well.
They're progressive.
They're not just four things. The love leads on to compassion, and that leads on to the joy, and the equanimity at the end is really like the highest accomplishment. Okay, so let's. Sorry, Neil. Okay, carry on.
Oh, it's a great joy to see you again, and to see that you have the strength to speak for an hour and a half anyway. So
oh, yes. Thank you so much.
Keep getting stronger. Today's session was very interesting for me, because I've been, for want of a better word, struggling with these words enlightenment and Buddha nature in terms of relating not just to Buddhists. As you say, if you say enlightenment, there's a sort of switch on the bulb moment idea, which probably isn't very helpful. But more particularly, if I'm talking with or writing for non-Buddhists, and if you say Buddha nature, enlightenment, there's almost a very switch off. I'm not interested in that sort of thing. So the best alternatives that I've come up so far, which probably aren't very good, but is perfection and potential for perfection. I'm not sure how non-Buddhists would relate to that, but it's how would I put it? It's a softer inroad into trying to explain what Buddha nature and enlightenment actually are.
Yeah.
Maybe you have better terms. I don't know.
I don't, because a literal translation of the Tibetan Sanje would be awakened plenitude, right? But I mean, that doesn't really, hasn't got a ring to it. But you've got the awakened from the sleep of ignorance and the plenitude of all the possible qualities. So I think that they're quite good. And there's a thing in the Six Paramitas teaching, which says generosity. Who doesn't want to be more generous, less mean? Who doesn't want to have purer conduct? Says when you take the six paramitas to their fullness, you're a Buddha whether you like it or not. You're just as wise as you can be. Your meditation's as perfect as it can be. You are diligent, you're forbearing, and so on. So it's the perfection, perfect being is what we're looking at. Just when we come to the chapter next week, point 1, we'll feel the word perfection's got a certain ring to it. It's used a lot, like the great perfection and things like this. But when we look at the very kind of nature of what is good, what is enlightenment, what is this awakened plenitude, number 1, absolutely central, is purity. The two words don't sound synonymous at first, perfection and purity. They sound, but the perfection is a purity. I think for people who practice meditation, you get it. Your mind is just clear. It's clear like space. It's pure, it's free from all the stuff that limits it, darkens it, hurts it. And that's as perfect as it can get.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so hopefully see you next week. Take good care in the meantime.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you
That's
very
much.
much, Ken. Lovely to see you and everyone.